Welcome to the IELTS Listening Practice Test. This is Section 1. You will hear a conversation between two people set in an everyday context. You will have time to read the questions before you start listening. You will hear the recording only once. Answer the questions as you listen. Now, let's begin with Section 1. You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 1 to 5. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning. I'd like to book a room for next weekend, please.
Of course. For how many nights will you be staying?
2 nights, from Friday to Sunday.
All right. And would you prefer a single room or a double room?
A double room, please.
Certainly. Could I have your name, please?
Sure. It's Sarah Thompson.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen carefully and answer questions 6 to 10.
Thank you, Miss Thompson. May I have your contact number, please?
Certainly. It's 555-1234.
Great. Do you have any special requests for your stay?
Yes. I would like a room with a sea view, if possible.
I will make a note of that. Will you be needing any transportation from the airport?
No, thank you. I'll be renting a car.
All right. Your room is booked for the weekend. We look forward to your stay.
Thank you very much.
This is the end of Section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Welcome to Section 2 of the IELTS Listening Practice Test. You will hear a talk given by one speaker. You will have time to read the questions before you start listening. You will hear the recording only once. Answer the questions as you listen. Now let's begin with Section 2. You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our guided tour of the historical city center. Our first stop is the ancient city gate, which dates back to the 14th century. This gate was once part of the city's defensive walls, protecting its inhabitants from invaders. As we walk through, you'll notice the intricate carvings that tell the story of the city's founding. Next, we'll visit the Old Town Square, which has been the heart of the city since medieval times. Here, you can see the impressive town hall, known for its astronomical clock, one of the oldest in the world. At the top of the hour, you can watch the clock's figures come to life in a fascinating display. After exploring the square, we'll head to the Cathedral of St. James, a magnificent example of Gothic architecture. This cathedral took over 200 years to complete and is famous for its stunning stained glass windows. Don't forget to look up at the vaulted ceilings, which are truly a work of art.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen carefully and answer questions 16 to 20.
As we continue our tour, we'll make our way to the City Museum. This museum houses a vast collection of artifacts that trace the city's history from its earliest days to the present. One of the highlights is the exhibit on the city's role in the trade routes of the 17th century. We'll then visit the Riverside Park, a beautiful area perfect for a relaxing stroll. The park is home to several sculptures by local artists and offers stunning views of the river. It's also a great spot for a picnic if you brought your own lunch. Our final stop will be the historic marketplace, where you can sample local delicacies and buy handmade crafts. The marketplace has been a center of commerce for centuries and remains a vibrant part of the city's culture today.
This is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Welcome to section 3 of the IELTS Listening Practice Test. In this section, you will hear a conversation between 2 or more speakers discussing an academic subject. You will have time to read the questions before you start listening. You will hear the recording only once. Answer the questions as you listen. Now, let's begin with section 3. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hi, David. Have you finished the research on our project about renewable energy sources?
Almost, Anna. I've gathered quite a bit of information on solar and wind energy. What about you?
I've been focusing on hydroelectric power. Did you know that it's one of the oldest methods of generating electricity? The water cycle is fascinating and provides a consistent source of energy.
That's interesting. Solar energy, on the other hand, relies heavily on the weather and daylight hours, but it's becoming more efficient with advancements in technology.
True. Wind energy is similar in that it depends on weather conditions. However, with the development of offshore wind farms, we can harness wind power more effectively. Did you come across any challenges related to these energy sources?
Yes. Cost and storage are significant challenges. The initial investment for solar panels and wind turbines is high, and storing the energy for use when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing remains a problem.
That's a good point. Hydroelectric power also has its drawbacks, like the impact on aquatic ecosystems and displacement of communities. We should include these issues in our report.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen carefully and answer questions 26 to 30.
So we've got a lot of good information here. How do you think we should structure our presentation?
I think we should start with an introduction to renewable energy and why it's important. Then, we can each talk about our specific areas. I'll cover hydroelectric power, and you can handle solar and wind energy.
Sounds good. We should also include a section on the challenges and potential solutions. For instance, advancements in battery technology could address the storage issues we've discussed.
Agreed. And maybe we could end with a discussion on the future prospects of renewable energy, considering policy changes and technological advancements.
That's a great idea. We should also prepare some visuals, like charts and graphs, to make our points clearer.
Definitely. I'll start working on the slides for hydroelectric power. Do you have any suggestions for resources?
Yes, there's a recent study from the Renewable Energy Institute that has some great data. I'll send you the link.
You now have half a minute to check your answers. You will hear a talk given by one speaker. You will have time to read the questions before you start listening. You will hear the recording only once. Answer the questions as you listen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we will be discussing the impact of climate change on marine life. The world's oceans are undergoing significant changes due to rising temperatures, increased carbon dioxide levels, and acidification. One of the most noticeable effects of climate change is coral bleaching. Corals have a symbiotic relationship with algae, which provide them with food through photosynthesis. However, when water temperatures rise, corals become stressed and expel the algae, causing them to turn white or bleach. Prolonged bleaching can lead to coral death, which has devastating effects on marine ecosystems, as many species rely on coral reefs for habitat and food. Another consequence of climate change is the alteration of migration patterns of marine species. For example, certain fish species are moving towards the poles in search of cooler waters. This shift affects not only the species themselves, but also the fishing industries and local communities that depend on them. Ocean acidification, caused by increased levels of carbon dioxide being absorbed by the oceans, is another major concern. This process reduces the availability of carbonate ions, which are essential for the formation of shells and skeletons in marine organisms such as mollusks and corals. The weakening of these structures makes these organisms more vulnerable to predation and environmental changes. Furthermore, the melting of polar ice caps is contributing to rising sea levels, which threaten coastal habitats and human settlements. The loss of ice also impacts species such as polar bears and seals, which rely on sea ice for hunting and breeding. It's important to understand that these changes are interconnected. The loss of one species or habitat can have a ripple effect throughout the entire ecosystem. Addressing the impacts of climate change on marine life requires a comprehensive approach, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions, protecting marine habitats, and supporting sustainable fishing practices. In conclusion, climate change poses a significant threat to marine life, and its effects are being felt across the globe. By taking action now, we can help preserve the health of our oceans and the diverse species that inhabit them.
This is the end of Section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.